Hi and welcome to another video. Now, as I've mentioned in my previous videos, and you may have picked up on, none of my games or titles are supplied to me by publishers or devs for review. I buy them all myself, and this means I don't always get to pick things up at release and have to wait until they're a little bit cheaper, shall we say. So I'm going to start putting these into a series because I've got a few of them. I've got a little bit of a backlog, and this is the first one, what we should probably best describe as me being late to the party. So the one I want to look at today is Overpass. So if you're not aware, Overpass basically is a title that aims to open up a new category in the racing genre, and in that regard it does its job pretty well. So it's based around extreme off-roading. You've got two categories of vehicles, so all-terrain vehicles and quad bikes, and there's roughly an equal vehicle count between them. The events themselves that you take part in are broken down into two types: obstacle races, which are doing laps around a kind of vehicular obstacle course is the only way to describe it, with seesaws and things to climb over and trails to navigate and mud bogs to go through and things like that. And then you've got hill climbs, which are very steep, very slippy, very twisty and turny, particularly challenging hill climb events, which require a mixture of brute force, acceleration, and just creeping forward centimetre by centimetre. And both of these are run against the clock. Contains a number of quite varied and different environments, from a man-made open cast mine type environment to your woodland environment to deserts to a kind of coastal seaside area. So there's a bit of variety in there, and you can also take any of these and run them in a kind of free roam type mode as well. So in terms of the concept and the environments you're running in, it's on paper very, very interesting. So let's see how it stands up to my review methodology, and we'll start breaking it down. So first off, looking at driving simulation. And I scored driving simulation for Overpass as a 6, because on the face of it, Overpass falls into an interesting category. One in which going slowly is sometimes the quickest way, and knowing when to go quickly and when to take your time is the key behind that. That's what's going to get you the fastest times. So you need to gain an understanding of when to use the two-wheel drive, the four-wheel drive, and the diff lock, and that's the key to getting the most out of the vehicles. However, and you probably knew that was coming, these elements are handled in what can only be described as a very simplistic manner. Basically, if it's open and flattish ground, you pop it in two-wheel drive and you'll go quicker. Going gets rough, pop it into four-wheel drive, you drop speed, but you can now climb over things. Gets really tough and muddy or slippery, pop on the diff lock, you go even slower, reduces your steering input, and you can now get past the muddy, difficult bits. And it really doesn't gain any more depth than that, unfortunately. One of the other issues with the driving simulation and the physics side of it is rolling the vehicle is also a constant danger, and at times it does feel unfair, as it's very tricky to look around you when you're manoeuvring. So titles like Mud Runner and Snow Runner do that aspect much better, your ability to look around the vehicle and see what each of your wheels are doing. And what doesn't help there is when you do roll and you reset the vehicle, you often end up in a position that actually makes things worse, and that's really quite clear in the hill climb events, where it can leave you stuck in a position where you're not going anywhere, and you end up having to reverse slowly back down the hill, where you could roll again and get stuck in exactly the same position, and it ends up just becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you're better off restarting the event. And that's actually made even worse in the quads, because with the quad bikes you have to also balance the rider as well as the bike whilst trying to look around, and as such it's really easy to overbalance the rider, and you fall over and you reset in a position where the rider and the bike's already unbalanced, you fall over again, and it just feels unfair, to the point that I just simply stopped attempting to use the quad bikes. They just felt so unfair in that regard. When you come on along then next to the racing simulation, I gave this a 3. So remember, this is primarily looking at the AI here. And as all of the events are against the clock, you never get to see your opponents in action, just the end results. And this is quite quick because they fall into one of two camps. They are astoundingly slow for the obstacle races, and you will murder them most of the time, absolutely destroy their times, and they're absurdly quick for the hill climbs, which means you stand very little chance of getting up there before they do, even the slowest of them. It's basically the end result is the AI doesn't actually work for either of those categories. And given that some of the championships in the career mode mix these two events up, that just compounds the problem even further. So, a 3 is being generous in all honesty for the racing simulation. We then come on to a motorsport simulation, and again, this is an odd one because whilst the disciplines in Overpass are based on real world ones, the attempt to incorporate that feeling into the title is minimal. And instead you're faced with an overly complicated system in the career of rounds in a season with permanent damage mechanic that requires you to send vehicles away for repair and not have access to them if they're too banged up from the previous round. Now that in itself is a nice idea, but it's overcomplicated and it's not well explained to you at all. And if you don't have a spare vehicle, you just miss around. And it doesn't really tell you that, you just miss around and that's it. That's pretty much that championship or whatever you were doing done. The entire career in that regard just lurches from offering a kind of open form path to then forcing you down this heavy-handed linear control of your path, and you get no warning, and it just feels really disjointed as a result, particularly as the upgrades to the vehicles are locked behind event completion. Then you have to pay for them as well, but you don't know what they are until you unlock them. So you've just got this grid with no idea what to do and no help as to what to do. And if you, as I did, found the quads unusable, you've got about a third of it that's effectively now completely pointless because it's around the quads. That's right, you can't complete the career mode in either a quad or an ATV. You have to do both, depending on where you're going within it. We then get to accessibility, and again, unfortunately, this is a 3. As I've already mentioned, the career structure is messy, and it does very little to assist you in knowing what to do. It does provide a tutorial, but the tutorial allows you to skip sections, and it's almost as if they know that it's unbalanced and doesn't really work at all. Wheel support is provided. However, it's certainly a title that's better played with a gamepad, as, first of all, the quads simply don't work with the wheel, as you can't balance the rider at all, so that becomes pointless. And wheel support itself is incredibly basic and appears to have been very much tacked on as an afterthought. The only thing you can adjust is the overall force feedback, for which you've got a slider which ranges from feeling limp as an overcooked noodle to, nope, you're not turning that at all. However, that's not a linear scale along that slider. It gets to about 2/3 of the way along and just jumps. That's it. So it makes it unworkable. And when you're using a wheel, the soft lock comes into play at utterly random moments. Now, I'm not sure if this is to try and provide a tyre stuck on something effect or not, but it's just unpleasant and ineffective. Honestly, I would steer well clear of using Overpass with a wheel. Pun very much intended. Then we get to sound. Now, that's not something I would normally include in accessibility, but in this case, it's the single biggest reason why I can only play Overpass in very small doses. As most of the vehicles have CVT boxes and quite small buzzy engines, and the end result is an engine note that is just one constant high-pitched buzz that is grating to the extreme. And it's just deeply unpleasant, and it's weird, but sound in this case very much affects the accessibility of the title, or it certainly did for me anyway. We then come to content, which I gave it a 6, because on the face of it, content does seem to be quite generous for Overpass. But as you start exploring it, it soon becomes apparent that that falls into two halves. The locations, obstacle races and hill climbs, they are generous in number, particularly given this is a new IP. The vehicles, however, are a separate story. with half of the content effectively a tier below because of the awful rider balance mechanism for the quads, and a number of the vehicles a lot behind day one DLC, and that takes what's already quite a low vehicle count down even further. The issue with the content's also further hampered by the lacklustre career mode that, even if it was more accessible, is simply short on events and stuff to do. So moving on to value. Now, had Overpass been released as a budget title, it would have made up for a lot of these shortcomings. However, the simple fact is that as a full price release with content locked behind day one paid DLC, it's simply poor value for money given the relatively sparse content and career mode. So in summary, Overpass to me very much feels like a missed opportunity. It's got the makings of an excellent title with an approach to driving games that fits an interesting point between the likes of MudRunner and SnowRunner and the more traditional off-road titles such as WRC and Dirt. However, it's simply not executed well enough, with borderline unusable wheel support, half the vehicles an utter pain to use, and a career which is a mess to progress through and suffers from an unbalanced AI. It's a real shame because at times I really enjoyed Overpass and the concept is excellent. However, the issues with it start to grate too quickly and are too serious to recommend it as anything more than a vaguely interesting curio if you can pick it up dirt cheap. So that's my look at Overpass. If you found this interesting, please do feel free to give me a like. If you've got your own thoughts on Overpass, if you played it and disagree with anything that I've said here, please do pop them down below in the comments section. And if you want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified when new videos go up. Thanks very much for watching. Take care. Bye.